I'm Doc Neto, and I've been on People.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's a beautiful day to come on a podcast and to talk about people. We have a very inspiring and what's the other word now? Nato is a very interesting personality, especially if you're on Twitter and you've heard him and read all his posts. Very controversial, I must say. But yeah, that's who we have with us here. If you're listening in, we welcome you very specially to On People, our podcast on people. Here we dissect and analyze insights from the workplace across the world, and okay, we go just right in.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Aniema. I love that. I love the intro. So I'll introduce our guest, Doc Neto, professionally. So Dr. Ikpeme Neto, he's a medical doctor, obviously, an entrepreneur and a health economist with over 10 years of experience. He founded Wellahealth and they are focused on healthcare financing options for the next billion. He's passionate about everything technology and innovation and how they work with healthcare and improve healthcare access, healthcare quality. He's won like a couple of awards, multiple awards, I must say, including the prestigious Africa Business Heroes First Place Award in 2023. But before this award, we're going to go back in time. Dr. Ikpeme Neto. This is the only time I'll call you the full name. We're going to go back in time, Dr. Nato, as we introduce you, as you come in and just say your introductions. It will be great, to just hear what early work experience shaped your career path. So, welcome, Dr. Nato.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. And please call me Neto. I've dropped the
Nato.
doctor a long time ago since I entered the trenches of entrepreneurship. Doctor doesn't help anybody in that world.
Yes, yes. So welcome, welcome. So we'll take that question again. You know, um, when you started, I mean, you've been working for a while now. We've all been working for a while now. But what would you say was the early work experience that shaped your career path and just kept you in this field of healthcare and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so I mean, I always wanted to be a doctor. So I'll talk about healthcare first before entrepreneurship because I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur.
Mm.
That is, if you'd spoken to me 15 years ago and said I'd be a founder, I'll tell you never, not going to happen. But healthcare certainly, from when I was a kid, I mean, it's very cliched. I wanted to be a doctor to help people. There was somebody in my family that was sick. All of those cliches, like, totally applies to me. I also did love the sciences, so love biology, of course, love chemistry. I was able to apply myself at math, which I think is actually very important. The ability to just study, be self-driven, and apply yourself. And I was able to do that, and thankfully got into medical school. And so that was kind of always my dream, yeah, to be a doctor.
Awesome. So very clear linear path, from the time you were younger. I love it. So I mean, if you think back to the sort of skills that got you this far, now you're at that intersection of healthcare, of technology, of innovation. What skill would you say got you this far? It could be more than one
So,
as well.
oh yeah, no, no. In fact, they're opposite. So initially, so becoming a doctor, you have to conform. So it's obeying
Yeah.
all the rules. Reading all your stuff. Answering all the questions on your exams
Mm-hmm.
correctly. So there was a right way to do things, and you had to do it. So I certainly, was a conformist. I did things according to the way the rules, suggested you do them. I studied hard. I was very self-driven. Absolutely, you need to drive yourself. I'm very motivated, and ambitious as well. You don't get into medical school if you're not those things. I'm very
Yeah.
hardworking. But once I finished medical school and was training, I think my other attributes came out. The non-conformist bit, the
Yeah.
problem-solving bit, the
Yeah.
restless bit, the dissatisfied with the status quo bit. That all came
Yeah.
out. And honestly, I'm surprised it did because medicine kind of coaches and beats all of that out of you. It's very
So you
difficult to
think?
find. Oh, I think it's very difficult to find doctors that depart from medicine and do other things because of how much the system tries to beat out any invention essentially out of
To
you as a
tame
doctor.
you, as it were.
Mm, mm. Yes, yes, I love it. So you actually thought that there was, it had been bitten out of you, but literally it was just there dying lot, lying dormant, waiting for an opportunity not to. Okay, fantastic.
Okay,
All right.
so this is a good place to get into the next question about taking risks, right? I'm sure veering out of your career path in the medicine field and all the taming that you received from that training, right? And then now veering into technology, it would have required of you to take some risks. I'm sure some people will look at you and say, "Guy, what's this you're doing?" So what significant risk did you take in your career, and what did you learn from it?
So I think I did take some risks, but looking back, and I've thought about this over the years, that I actually realized. So I worked when I finished medical school. I went to medical school in
Okay.
Ireland. When I finished, it was like peak recession, and if you remember, if you're following European politics, Ireland had gone into um, a deep recession where they needed a bailout from the
Yes.
IMF and the European Central Bank. What that meant is that public finances were very strained. It was a very austere time, and the government could not meet its obligations. And
Mm,
what that meant for me as a doctor working in the public service was that a lot of my salaries were not being paid. So
wow.
now, think about this. I grew up with the thinking that if you go to study hard, go to school, be a doctor, you have your guaranteed salary for life. Now, that is
Yes.
true, and I mean, Ireland eventually, got out of that austere thing, and now that's not a problem. But what I essentially learned in that period was that maybe life isn't so predictable and certain.
Mm, okay.
I agree.
And I think that was a great lesson for me, actually, because then it kind of led me to think a lot deeper about economics in particular.
Mm,
Because to my mind, I'd done everything right, but yet here I was working and not being paid for everything I was working for. And I thought, okay, this isn't fair. And again, if you look at the dynamics of that period, what was happening was Ireland had borrowed a lot of money from essentially rich people, and they were obligated to pay those back. And the government said, "Oh, we have to pay these guys back, otherwise we'll be in trouble." And I was
mm.
thinking to myself, well, you're not in trouble if you don't pay me, the small guy, but there's some rich guy somewhere you have to pay back.
You have to pay.
And my response to that is, I want to be one of those rich guys that the country has to pay me back instead
Quite
of the
a
small guy
defining
on the
moment.
streets.
I
Exactly.
love
So
it.
the game is rigged, is essentially what I
Ah,
learned.
Yes, yes.
So
Yeah,
now, if you think about risk from that perspective, like essentially being an entrepreneur, for instance, is not really that risky if you think about it that way.
that's deep. I like that. So obviously, you start to realize that larger forces are at play, and if you're just the common, it's almost like two elephants fighting, and the grass suffers. Right at that point, you wear the
Exactly.
grass, even though you had done everything right, you trimmed yourself, you were good. All right, yeah, that makes sense. So it just now then going into your career, lots of people are so big on mentorship, 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 or at least early influences. And even though I have my own take on what mentorship looks like, for you throughout that, your journey, your career journey, did you have a mentor who played like a key role in your work journey? And how, if you did, or how did you pick out your mentors as well?
Yeah, so I remember distinctly when I made the decision to leave medicine and be an entrepreneur. I remember I saw this guy who I thought would be a great role model and a great mentor, and I emailed him and I said, "Oh, I'd love for you to be my mentor." Um, Now, fast forward 10 years down the road, it turns out the guy
Oh,
was a fraud and totally
oh my
crazy crazy
goodness.
guy. So
I feel like I know this
people
person,
can
but yeah.
pretend. Yeah, you do actually. I'm not going to say who they are, but it turns out like they have their own command.
Yes.
But I remember the person, I don't know if they responded, but I feel like they may have said they're too busy or something like that.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I don't judge them because personally, people reach out to me now and say, can you mentor me? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm too busy. I
Mm.
just can't. And so, I thought I needed a mentor, but I didn't. And actually, nobody does because the reality is that there's a lot of mentoring out there in the form
Yeah.
of books and
Yeah.
articles and
Mm.
podcasts and videos on YouTube. So you don't need a mentor, actually. You just need to be motivated, self driven to go find the resources you need. I think people that are looking for specific mentors are just being lazy and kicking the can down the road. Go and find the articles, the books, the stuff out there, and create your own mentoring via all the stuff. And so, personally, what I like to do is actually write stuff and put stuff out there so that you can go and read it and add it to a library of resources that essentially mentors you what you do.
Mm.
Yes, I completely agree with you. Which is why I said I have my own take. But I find that, like you said, the younger generation, and they're very big on I'm looking for a mentor, and they do the same thing that you did. They send emails, they send things out, and most times we just may not have the time in that period, right? And that's the right answer. If you're self-directed, self-motivated, you can easily pick out mentors from afar and say, and before you know it, someone may even think, oh, Nato is my mentor, but he has no idea. He's my mentor, but he
Exactly.
doesn't even know I exist. Why? Because I follow what he says. I listen to what he says. I apply some of the things that he says, and I can see a difference. So not every time find a mentor and say this person is my mentor. That said, I do have a mentor, but I only got that mentor about 2 years ago, and that is a very unique situation. Before then, I've not had a mentor, and I've been working for I've been working for let's just say some decades. Yeah. Okay. So
And I
fantastic.
think
Thank
I
you.
do as well. So I think initially, maybe I think everybody has mentors eventually, especially when you
Yeah.
prove yourself. Because to get to the next level, you have to have some type of person you look up to, who you can reach out to.
Yes.
And I do have those people now. But if you've not proven yourself by mentoring yourself with resources, it's very difficult to
Yep.
get to that stage. So for instance, I do work in microinsurance, and
Mm.
one of my mentors is essentially one of the biggest or the father, if you like, of microinsurance in the world.
Ah,
Now he has my time because I've proven myself. When
yes.
I say, he's a British guy in his sort of 50s, maybe even 60s now. If I say, hey, Richard, can I get on a call with you? He drops stuff and gets on a call with me because he knows that I'm high
Mm,
value. I will go and execute to a high,
mm,
um, level.
mm,
But if you're a nobody from nowhere, I mean, like nobody's going to want to put any time or effort into you because people want to claim success, right? People want to be part of something
mm.
great. So I think everybody has to prove themselves to a certain level. And then, the great people will come around you and give you the support. And in fact, you can use the support because when I get on the phone with Richard, for instance, I'm asking him like proper questions that he can actually help me and use his advice to. Not like, where do I find beans in the
Well,
market?
you can.
I don't know. Go to the market, Yeah.
Exactly. I love, 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 love that. Even though, I'm always greedy and I want more, So I think for me, I'm already thinking in my head, Anima, that we should write something on mentor
Self mentorship,
yourself
yeah.
and get Neto to be involved in that, right? Very short, just so that people recognize that people want to identify with success and progress and growth. No one wants to say, I'm a mentor to, and then the person is doing nothing and asking them things that they can get from
Mm-hmm.
Google themselves, the basic things, and they can. If you're going to get someone or ask someone for their time, ask them for great use of their time so they feel like, my goodness, those are solid questions, not just to say, oh, I spoke to Richard in your case today, sorts of thing. So thank you. I love that. Love that. We'll be coming for our mentor yourself um, notes and nuggets.
For
So
sure.
that's
Okay.
me. Yes.
Well, still looking at the early days of your career, right, and the influences that shaped everything that you now do. Okay. So what sparked your interest in leadership? Because you can't be where you are now and not be leading. You're leading your team. You're a conversation expert. People are following the things you write on social media. So what sparked your interest in leadership?
It's a great question. I think with leadership, it's dual. So I think some people kind of naturally are prone to it, and some people have to learn it
Mm.
along the way. Um, I think for me, I've always been a shy, like I'm a shy, reserved person. So again, if you'd told me 15 years ago that I'd be doing this, I tell you never in a million years. Um, Always been very shy. Don't really want to be the center of attention. But what I found actually was that if I'm passionate about something, all of my personal encumbrances
Ah.
disappear. You know, so I'll stay in the back. I won't say anything. But if the issue is something I care about, I'm in front. I'm in front. I'm doing things I don't believe I can do.
Okay.
So for me, I think what people see as leadership is really me being passionate about the things that I'm passionate about. It's caring about certain things. And at the heart of what I care about is I believe that everybody should have equal access to opportunities to make them reach their potential, and
Yeah.
specifically around healthcare. And so I've always felt it was unfair that certain people have better access and other people don't. And it's a function of where they are born, not that they are better or worse. And so for me, it's always like it riles me up that that unfairness just exists. And so because I'm passionate about it, when I see opportunities where I can right that wrong, you will see me at the front trying to advocate for it. So I think that the issues I care about naturally brings the passion, and that kind of brings the leadership, if you like, that people may see and want to
Ah.
follow. That's one aspect. There's also the other bit about kind of investing in yourself and knowledge
Okay.
and all of that, and trying to invest in people. So again, I believe in people. I think that you can't get anything done without people and relationships. And a lot of times the way to do that is by generally showing care and concern for them and investing in them.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times I try to build myself so that I can actually help and build other people. Because you can never hope to like impact or improve anybody if you yourself, you've not led yourself. So again, a theme that's already kind of showing up here is you got to look
Yeah.
in the mirror all the time. So it's mentor yourself, it's lead yourself, it's be the best you can be. And I think when you're that, naturally, it will radiate, and people will want to kind of follow, and kind of seek your leadership, if you like. I think that's been very clear in the way I think
Okay,
about
that's
things.
really good. I hear a lot of self leading, especially from how you responded to the question about mentoring. You first of all mentor yourself and then you graduate to the other phases of mentorship. And then here again about leadership, you lead yourself first before you start to lead other people. From listening to you, I was trying to place your leadership style. I did not get it. So can you tell me what's your leadership style?
So I'm of the school I'm of the school of thought that different people should experience you differently depending on who they are or where they
Ah,
are.
oh,
So
wow.
I try to mold myself into what I need to be for that time. And I think this is the best kind of way to be, because I think of leadership skills and multiple skills as tools in a toolbox. And so sometimes you take a hammer because you need to hit a nail. Sometimes you take a saw because you need to cut something. And so I try to put myself in a position where I can use different tools to deliver the results. And so I don't think I have a certain style. I try to pick the style that is best suited for the
Situation.
scenario that I'm in, to help whatever the progress I need to bring about.
Okay, just hearing you say it, I have a tada moment.
Wow.
Your leadership style is situation. It's situational. Okay.
I love it. I
There you
actually
go.
do. I do actually like it, and I think it's true because sometimes, when we talk about, because we do a lot of trainings with leaders, and we try and get them to decide or figure out what their leadership style is, and some people would say, "I'm more democratic, I'm more autocratic," but a lot of times we end up in, sometimes you are a particular style of leader based on the set of people you are leading, and that's very similar to what you have
Yeah.
just shared. Situational leader, depending on the time, the people, the duration, the project, just depending. So that's great. So now taking it to all the wins that you've had at Weller Health, I enjoyed watching. I'm not sure. I enjoyed watching, when you won the Africa Business Heroes award, that
I
award.
haven't
I
watched it, by the way, myself. I
Yeah,
don't enjoy
you were
watching
very
it.
composed. Did you? Were there tears? Were there tears?
Oh,
There were
yes,
tears, right?
certainly.
There were tears because I
Yes,
know. I think
yes.
I saw tears, but I'm not sure. Were there extra tears? Afterwards, like, oh my goodness.
Not afterwards.
But I really enjoyed, and I enjoyed that your response to your composure while they were asking you certain questions, and it made me wonder in terms of when you're building your team. What are you looking out for when you're hiring? The sort of skills. And I'm asking this question because I read or I followed one of your. There was a take you had in terms of generations or different generations and their approach to work. But I want to lead it back to what are you looking out for, regardless of the generation, regardless of the person. What are you looking for in terms of skills or the type of person that you would want at Wellahealth?
Yeah, great question. And to be honest, I don't think anybody ever gets it fully right.
Mm,
And you kind of have hopes and dreams about what you want, but it's very
yeah.
difficult in practice because people respond very differently, and your perception of them is very different to when they're in the real scenario. So, the one thing that I definitely subscribe to or idea is that attitude over skills. I think that
Yeah.
skills can be learned and trained, but attitude is very difficult. And so
Mm,
when I do interviews in particular, I'm looking out for passionate people. I think like it's very difficult to hide passion. And if people cannot be passionate about anything, I kind of worry about it. And if they cannot
mm,
communicate that passion. And so I'm always probing in my interviews to find, what are they passionate about?
mm,
And can they kind of, can they help, can they share that passion in a way that I can relate to it? And honestly, the people that we've hired that are passionate and can share that usually turn out pretty decent compared to others. Because what we do for the skills part, a lot of times we have like, formal testing that weeds out people that don't
yeah.
have certain baseline skills, all of that. So if you have a baseline skill, you have a degree, you do our test and you score decently, then the question is, are you a right fit with your attitude,
Wow.
with the culture that we have? So passion about something, ability to communicate that, and then curiosity. So I'm really big on, are you a curious person? So it's one of our four values. We have four values at Wella Health. Is are you a curious person? Are you the person that, if I ask you a question and you don't know, you can come back to me a day later with, 100 different resources about the thing I asked you about? Um, that's actually very difficult to find, I have to say, in our
Mm,
local culture because we are coached
true.
out of it, actually.
Yeah.
If you think about it, if you go to a primary school now and you're asking too many questions, they say you're ITK,
Mm-hmm.
you too know. Why are you
Mm,
talking too much? Why are you
mm.
asking too many questions? They want us to
Brilliant.
conform. Don't
Mm,
think outside the box. Your lecturer in university gives you a project. He wants you to bring back exactly what people are bringing back for the
yeah.
last 20 years.
Mm,
Any
yeah.
outside the box thinking is no, 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 no. So we're not a very curious culture. And I find that, even though it's a value we like and we want to hire for, it's very difficult to actually find. We have to coach people out of the traditional way of thinking to be a bit more curious.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's some of the things that we look at. And then data, I love data. So if you can, convince me with data, you're hired.
Love it. Yeah. So I love it because if you combine a few of the things you said earlier, passion, curiosity, being resourceful, having a strong sense of data management, analysis, data mapping, then that's you're the person to work with Neto. That's just me giving my own tips and hacks. I'm sure there are other things as well, but that was very
Yes.
nicely put as well. And I like that what you said. We've coached people out of curiosity. And you're right. You ask, and it's not comparing, but you see different kids from different places. You ask them, a man comes to the house, and you ask some people, some kids. I don't want to talk about the races or wherever, but you ask them what man came, and they'll tell you, oh yes, a man came, a man came, he was looking for mommy or looking for daddy. You ask certain people and they'll tell you down to the break it down, color of eyes, height, he was tall, he was this, he spoke in a particular way, sounded like he was from this. And that's just someone who is naturally curious, naturally asking questions, naturally thinking. So that is so true. So we really have to find a way to bring that culture of curiosity back into starting from schools and then and then obviously the people who have gone past schools, just taking it into the workplace. Be curious, pursue mastery, just focus on asking questions. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's it
I
from
think
me.
from the management side, it's allowing mistakes. I think main reason why people are not curious and don't ask questions and don't do things differently is because their mistakes are punished.
Yeah.
So I try not to be too critical when people make errors. As long as they can explain a rationale and that rationale
Mm,
makes sense, and I'm like, okay,
Mm.
that makes sense. Here's how I would do it differently, but not to be too critical or punish um, people's failures too much and allow them
Yeah.
learn. Like there's some times where people come to me with things and I know that this is going to end badly, but I allow them anyway to go and learn that lesson, right? So that they also know that I want them to actually like I want them to, because there are times when I need them to go through that process in things that I don't know
Processing.
the answers to. If I shut it down because I know they'll fail, then I lose the opportunity to teach them how to be
To
curious and how to
teach.
go out and learn themselves.
Yes. And the best way to learn is, through experience anyway. Once you learn
Absolutely.
and there's some failure involved, you know that this doesn't work. You move elsewhere next time, and you can also teach the next
Absolutely.
set of people. Completely
Yeah.
agree. Fantastic.
all
Thank you.
right. So hearing you speak about data, it just made me think about how data is such a buzzword now. Everybody's talking data, throwing numbers around, you know. So it moves me now to our next question about a current trend, especially for those of us who are in Nigeria and for you as a business person doing business in Nigeria. Jackpot is a thing now. I mean, and for the society, is resulting in a brain drain. Our talents are moving elsewhere. They're looking for other things and all of that. But for you as an entrepreneur, right, if you're going to advise somebody who is looking for an opportunity in the healthcare sector, what would you advise them to do?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you set that up very well. There's a huge talent deficit. And I think when the opportunities are is how do we solve that? Actually, how do we solve the talent deficit? How do we pull in people and train them to provide sufficient care at even a baseline level so that the kind of more skilled and more expensive people or talents that we have are left to deal with the more difficult
Mm,
tasks. And I think this is a problem in companies as well, is that a lot of times, I mean, I've seen this, a lot of my skilled people have left, gone to Canada, gone to the UK, gone to the US. Um, Replacing them is very, very challenging. So the question that we then have to solve is how do we take the aspects of those people that are super skilled and turn them into processes that we can pass on to lower
mm,
skilled people, where we don't need as much curiosity, where we don't need as much, academic prowess, we don't need as much training or educational achievement, where somebody say that has a secondary school level of understanding can actually still do a job. And there's a place for that. Because the reality is that we don't have a lot of amazingly skilled people. So how can we? I don't want to say dumb things down, but how do we make it simpler so that others can come, take those simple tasks away, and then the people that are more skilled, we leave
the
them to
more
deal with the
complex
super
things.
skilled stuff.
Mm,
So exactly. So a simple example I give, especially for founders. So I do some coaching and mentoring for founders. I say to founders, you need an executive assistant. That's like if you want to be super productive, you need an executive assistant because you need them to take away all the
mm.
basic stuff so that you have none of that stuff and you can focus on the bigger things that you need to be able to focus on. That's the way I think about it.
Okay. I mean, that's a very good way to think about it because what I hear you saying in essence is we find a way to upskill the available resources so that they can start to do the basics while the people who are on top get onto more strategic things. Okay, thank you so much for that response.
Exactly, more complex things. Yeah.
Fantastic. I like that as well. An area that I find that we also have in common, is work life balance or work life fit, and then mental health. And this is very important because I know recently you were doing research on depression and anxiety amongst Nigerian entrepreneurs. And again, you're very focused, you're very data focused, and your rationale was the data doesn't exist, which is very key because a lot of the time when we do anything that has to do with mental health, we're getting data from abroad, we're getting data outside.
Exactly.
Recently, we're checking something out, and we saw that workplace stress and anxiety disorders had gone up. And they done a survey in America where they were talking about 40% of the people experiencing this at different points in time. I know your research is still very early days. You're probably still just gathering data, trying to figure out how to use it. But how do we, and now I'm not even looking at you as a founder, I'm looking at it as individuals at work in Nigeria. We know the constraints that we have, from traffic to power to electricity. Sorry, power and electricity are the same, to everything that is literally to internet connectivity issues, everything that just affects people and makes work slightly harder. And in some cases, not just slightly, really
Mm-hmm.
hard compared to other areas. How do we manage the stress that we have? There's also a culture problem. There's also a leadership slash culture plus culture multiplied by culture and leadership problem. Everything going on. How should we manage the stress? How do we avoid breaking down? How do we even, how do we? I put up something recent. I know it seems like a statement becoming a question, but you understand the problem. I put up something recent and I said the biggest problem with remote work is people fighting for the right to their time. So just because, oh, I'm like, yeah, Neto is working from home, but in my head, I'm thinking he's working from home. That means he should have been enjoying himself. Why does he have to close at 6 p.m. or 5 p.m.? At 1 a.m., I'm still sending messages and I'm expecting that, well, you didn't come to the work, you didn't go, you were not in traffic, you've been chilling, you've been Netflix, whatever it is, how do we manage the stress? How do we, we're not even asking for a healthy work life balance now. How do we even just move that, how do we move the mark just a bit in Nigeria?
Yes, yeah. I mean, great question and statements. I think it's very difficult. First of all, so when I looked at last May was Mental Health Awareness Month, and so I
Yes, it
often
was.
posted things
Yeah.
on Twitter, and I thought, oh, I wonder what the rates of depression and anxiety within African entrepreneurs are. I had a look and I couldn't find anything, nothing
Wow.
at all,
Hmm.
like literally
Hmm.
nothing, not even one, like nothing. And this is very strange, for this is academic literature. Like there's nothing in the academic literature on depression and anxiety in African entrepreneurs. Zero. And I found this very baffling because I mean I'm one and I know how difficult my life is. Why is this not being represented in the data? And it's important. Like the academic literature is the building block for further things downstream of that. And so that inspired the work I'm doing around collecting data and actually writing an academic paper on depression and anxiety in Nigerian entrepreneurs specifically. So early data, I'll give you early insights. We've collected over 200
Okay.
responses now, and the early
Nice.
analysis says over 60%
Wow.
of Nigerian entrepreneurs exhibit clinical symptoms of depression.
Mm.
Clinical.
Mm.
Yes, yes. So that survey you took it, didn't you, Tom?
I did. I'm now
It is a
wondering where I fit in this.
it's it's a clinically validated
Exam.
survey that kind of is predictive of symptoms or signs of depression.
Hmm.
So huge concerns, over sixty
Very
percent.
humbling.
Now there is challenge around adverse selection and things like that. So I'm trying to kind of make sure that I overcome some of those limitations so that it's when I do publish it, it is significant data statistically, that is. But it shows anyway that lots of people are suffering. Now there's multiple reasons. The one that I am increasingly, I don't want to say enamored, but increasingly interested in is actually loneliness. And you've highlighted it there around working from home. What people don't realize is that over the last few years, we have become more and more isolated
We have.
in our communities, first of all. So even before we talk about work, in our communities, a lot of younger people are becoming less and less religious. Now
Mm,
that's fine. You have, that's your choice if you want to be less religious. But what religion gives you is a community
mm,
actually.
yes, it does.
So our parents, they go to church. They are very involved in all these, societies and this and that. A lot of it related to religion, and we think that they do those things just because we don't realize that it is actually protective of their mental health. And so, I guess as a simple advice, to anybody listening to this is that if you're anti-religion, that's actually fine. But one reason to be more religious is for the community benefits. So maybe close
Yes.
your ears when I read the Bible, but go have some friends. you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that's one aspect. And so we are disconnected from that, community we would have had. Then obviously we are now more urban. It
Mm-hmm.
means that we don't have those, our extended family that used to be around us. Your cousin
Around
is
us.
down the
Yeah.
road, your auntie is, around the corner. We are all, in urban areas. Many of us have, Japad, for instance. So we don't know who our neighbor is.
Yes.
The guy across the street from you. When I was growing up, we used to, at Christmas time, share food around the neighborhood.
Mm,
We don't do that in my neighborhood now.
anymore. Yeah. Yes,
You know
that
what
is
I mean? So
true.
we've just become more and more
Isolated.
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 One place that we used to be more connected was at the workplace,
Mm,
right? We'll leave our house in the morning, we go to work, we gist, we talk, we do work together, and we think it's just work, but we're actually connecting
Yeah.
socially, you know?
mm,
But now with work from home, we don't have that. So you now have people, right, that actually in a week might go without talking to anybody or connecting or seeing anybody at all. Like that's a recipe for disaster.
it is.
You now have the added stress of, like you say, power, internet, all of that stuff, and social media. So let's not even talk about social media. Social media is a disaster for our mental
On its
health.
own. Yes.
Exactly. And so people are really, really struggling, but we have nowhere to go, no place to talk about it. And I think it's going to end up in a very bad place for us as a society, certainly, but definitely for entrepreneurs in particular.
I don't. I'm not even. Okay. Carry on.
Yeah, on what to do. So the question is what to
What to
do,
do?
right? I think the first thing is you have to be deliberate. So
Yeah.
awareness. So I mean, part of this conversation is creating awareness. Part of what I'm doing with the research, and when I go to disseminate, is creating awareness. Because a lot of us don't know we are depressed. That's the first thing. We actually don't know that what we are suffering is a very, very terrible mental health condition. We just think it's normal,
Yeah.
but most times it's not. We can have a healthier and better life. So
Mm,
awareness first of all, and then once you're aware and say, "Oh crap," I'm not terribly depressed, but I'm not super happy either. Maybe in the middle, which is where a lot of us are.
yeah.
What can you do? So be deliberate. So I think with those stressors we have, it's setting up your life so that it is a little bit easier for you to live. So being deliberate about that. A lot of us just kind of stumble through life, but be
Mm-hmm.
deliberate about, okay, how am I going to solve power? How am I going to solve water? How am I going to solve internet? What is my plan A, B, and C? Actually write it out and try to solve those things so you don't have to think about it. Or if you do have to think about it, you have a plan B, C, and D. Like be
Yeah.
super deliberate about that. Don't leave it to chance. Don't hope. Plan for it. I think it's the first thing. The Nigerian environment is not a place for people that don't plan well.
Yes.
You know,
So
That just
if
true.
you live
happens.
in Europe, if you live in Europe or America, your government is planning for you. You don't have to bother. Your government has playgrounds around you for you to go out. Your
Yes.
kids can go. There's a
Yes.
public library. There's this, there's that. You don't have to think about your life. In Nigeria, you have to be very deliberate. So plan for those, infrastructural problems. Next,
Mm,
then you then have to plan for social connection. People
yes.
are ashamed to say that they are lonely.
Mm,
Don't be ashamed to admit it to yourself. Sure, don't go and
especially
broadcast it,
as a
right?
new one.
But at least admit to yourself that actually I'm alone, I feel lonely, I need social connection.
Mm,
So then the next thing is how do you solve it? Now, if you're an extrovert, Thank God for you. But if you're an introvert like me, it's very challenging.
Yeah.
Introverts are terrible at going out to solve this for themselves. And so, what I've done personally, and I'll speak about myself, is what I've done is just had hobbies. And so,
Mm,
what are you interested in? What do you like? Or what can you try? So when I was in university, I used to run a society. So again, volunteer for things, run things. I
mm,
used to run a society, and in that society it was an Afro Caribbean society. I went to college in Dublin, like I said, and we used to do like events and
yeah.
classes. And
Yeah.
one time we started to do salsa dancing classes, and it turns out that I was pretty decent at salsa dancing, and so I've been dancing
Mm,
salsa now for like over a
Nice.
decade. And so
wow.
I teach salsa and I also do like salsa events. So that's been a way for me to have a hobby. It's also physical. So exercise is really important for your
Mm.
mental health. So exercise, hobby, and I can also connect with people. So that is how I've kind of solved it for myself. Is it's one way is a hobby that I can connect with other people. Some people use football. So especially for guys, football is a great tool to connect. Every week they go play football. After they go play football, they undo all the exercise that they've done by
Yeah.
having beer and chicken or meat or suya or whatever.
But
Eh,
you're right. But they feel their social connection quota.
exactly. That's it. That's been done.
Yes. Yes.
But this is not going to come and meet you in your house. You have to deliberate about it and go out and
Yeah.
do it and connect. So it's finding like-minded people like you if you're a founder, founder groups, founder events, meeting in person. It's not enough to just have phone calls. Actually go meet people. There's value in meeting people in person and doing things together that will get you to a better mental health position.
Ah,
Fantastic.
so
Fantastic. That was so good. That was so good. Just understanding that there are different buckets and you have to fill the quota for all those different buckets, but deliberately plan. And obviously, starting off with you admitting, being honest with yourself, and recognizing that, look, there's a bit of an issue here. So I really like that. I think we'll go straight into our agony uncle section. And Eva, you take the question. We have people that just share it from within our community. And once they knew you were coming, I think the question was geared into everything that you have spoken about. So yes,
all
Anima,
right.
over to you.
So this question is from someone in the workplace, right? The person has gotten to the point where it's getting more and more difficult to get out of bed because they don't find work as interesting as, I mean, maybe it used to be or as they hoped that it will be. And they're thinking about leaving work without providing notice. They also know that it's not proper protocol, right? You need to give notice before leaving, but they don't feel like they are supported on their job. They feel like they don't have a lot in common with their coworkers. They also have morals and have said things that don't feel right for them. That's speaking of their colleagues now. Their colleagues don't have morals and have said things that are not right for them. The person is asking now, what positive advice can you give that can help them maybe to stay on this job or to move to another one, so that, they don't fall out, because this person is saying here that one more month on this job is going to literally, literally kill them. So please help, doc.
Yeah, geez, my heart goes out to you. It's a difficult place to be. It does sound like your mood is low and you have some symptoms of depression. Yeah, so first thing is if you can get professional help and advice, absolutely do that. If you're not getting out of bed in the morning, that's often not a good sign. About what you can do. So what has happened in the workplace, I'd say over the last sort of decade or two, is that people are looking to find more fulfillment at work. I think probably 20, 30 years ago, people didn't care about fulfillment at work per se. They just went, they did their job, they went home. They maybe found
We're
fulfillment in their
getting into the
families.
generational
But
conversation.
that is changing. Yes, exactly. That is changing. Is younger generations want to feel like they're fulfilled at work, that their company is, a good positive company that's changing the world, which is why, corporations these days are doing all of these, things to look good. And because people more and more wants to feel like, they're
Hmm.
changing the world. And I think that's fair. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Some people are totally fine with just going to work, doing their work, going home, finding fulfillment elsewhere. Some people want to find fulfillment in work, so that's fair. If where your work doesn't align with your values, it can be very difficult to feel good about the
True.
work. And so, if that's the case, you may then have to, find alternative employment that does fit with your values. How you do it is important. I'm glad you know that living suddenly is not good, so don't do that.
Yes.
you know,
Thank you.
never do that. Go to the process, end things right. Because you'd be surprised how that comes. I've been in this situation before. I've been in positions where I wanted to burn a bridge, but I, swallowed it. I was humble. I went along, and eventually, that person that was my quote unquote enemy and hated me was the person that recommended me later on for
Imagine
something
that.
Yes.
amazing. So yeah, that people can tell you those stories a lot of times. So there's no value in burning bridges, zero value. Even if a company is terrible to you, they're this and that, they should do better. We agree. One guy told me something a couple of weeks ago that rings in my mind all the time. He says it may not be your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Wow. I like
Right?
that.
So people think, oh, well, it's not my fault, or it's not fair. Yeah, but it's your responsibility to take what you've been given and create a better future and opportunity for yourself. So yes, they
Yes,
may be
ma'am.
terrible, they might be nice, but take the responsibility for your future by leaving that place in the best of terms because it will stand to you later on. So yeah, if you have to leave, I think do it, but do it properly. Um, but can you stay? Can you transfer to a different team? Can you find fulfillment elsewhere? Can you change things within where you are at so that things are better for you?
Yeah.
If that's an option, explore that. But I think realizing that the power is within yourself to make the change, and then seek help if you need to for support to get out of that. But also remember, outside of work, make sure that you have your social connection, you have your
Yeah.
hobbies, you have exercise,
Yeah.
you have all of those things that are giving you the strength. Because sometimes, honestly, you just have to do your
Yeah.
time. When I finished med school, the first 2 years, after med school was just a slog. It was difficult. I was working,
Yeah.
80-hour
Wow.
weeks. My bosses were not the best. But hey, you do your time. Sometimes you do have to do your time. And if that's the
Yeah.
case, recognize it, find fulfillment elsewhere, do your time, and then move on to something else.
Move on
Such a
properly,
thorough
the right
response.
way.
Properly.
That's so
Excellent.
thorough. Thank you so much.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. So as we close out, I mean, I think as you were speaking, I was thinking, I thought I already had our title for this podcast, and then you started. It may not be your fault, but it's your responsibility. Take responsibility, and I'm torn. I have like three potential titles that we can use, but it was such a great time with you. I mean, I've always known you to be smart, but my goodness, this was a lot of nuggets in how many minutes. So, as we close out, what book or what podcast or what resource would you say has had the biggest impact on how you view work or in life in general, just so that people can go and read up or learn more?
Yeah. Yeah, geez, lots of resources because I like to consume a lot. So it can be hard to recommend. I think learning is really important, and I think you need to pursue your own curiosities. I don't think
Yeah.
going through somebody's. If you look at my library, it's a reflection of my curiosities and what I'm interested in. And if I give it to you, it will not make sense to you. So I think the first thing is follow your curiosity. What are you passionate about? What are you interested in? And follow that. Google is wonderful these days.
It is.
But if there is one book that I read it every year actually for the last sort of 3 or 4 years. I read this book every year at the start of the year. It's a book called How Will You Measure Your Life by Clayton Christensen. I also gift it a lot, so I gift it a lot to a lot of people. But Prof. Christensen is a Harvard Business School prof. He's dead now, but he's the father of disruption. So every time tech people say disruption, 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 they are referencing his research on disruptive
Mm,
innovation. But he has a
mm,
number of theories and research he's done, and he's taking those theories to try and apply them into personal lives. He speaks about
yeah.
how he went to Harvard Business School, did a Harvard MBA, and they used to come back for reunions every 5 years. And he noticed how after every reunion, things got worse and worse for the people that were in the class. And one of the worst outcomes was the CEO of Enron, who ended up in jail, was his classmate in Harvard. And he's like, I knew this guy when he was in Harvard. He was a great guy, very ethical, wanted to do the best for the world, but decades later ended up in jail.
Jail.
And so one of the chapters in the book is how do you avoid going to jail?
How do you the stay the
His
course?
point being that there's the small decisions you make every day that seem like they're irrelevant, but eventually take you away from the path and end up in a place where you don't want to be.
You don't want to
Also talks about
exactly.
things like, families, investing in your family, um, short-term versus long-term investments
Mm,
of
mm,
how, it's tempting. So back to relationships. Relationships are super important for humans and for you and me. The
awesome.
idea
Thank
that
you.
investing, so I finish on this point, investing in relationships is difficult because in the short term, they don't look like they're giving us a return.
Yes.
So it's if I go enroll into a master's today and I study hard, at the end of the year I get a master's degree.
Yes.
If I invest that same time, energy, and effort into my relationship today, what do I get at the end of it? Like at the end of 1 year, nothing.
Yeah.
There's no
Nothing.
certificate.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of us, especially ambitious people, we want to be always progressing and always getting things we can put and say, oh, we are doing well. And so what we do is we spend our time on those
Mm,
pursuits.
mm.
More money, more education, more accolades. But the important things are personal relationships. We neglect them and then we end up sad, alone, and depressed, even though we have all the money in the world and all the certificates in the
Yeah.
world. And so it tells us do not make that trade off. Invest in the most important things because essentially how you measure your life is important and those long term things are more important than the short term things.
Wow, what a way to close out. Thank you so much, Neto, for being on People. We have enjoyed this conversation. We can't
Pleasure.
look forward to dissecting it and just picking out our nuggets from this as well. Yeah, so
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Yes.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on it.
Thank you for tuning in to another interesting episode of On People. We hope you enjoyed our conversation with Doc Nato as much as we did. Don't forget to subscribe and listen on your favorite podcast platforms. To keep conversations going, drop comments and questions on our social media handles. Until next time, it's bye for now.